name is Shongwe. I'm a presenter on One Day Leader on Morning Live, and I'm a newsreader on Metro FM. We have a society made up of human beings. Asina umphakathi wezinja. Ngakho kuwena lo wangizwisa ubuhlungu. If you want to fix this, you have to take responsibility and ownership and tell the next guy that no means no. What part of no don't you understand? Is it the N or the O? Every little girl in this country needs a protector. Every little girl needs a safety net. Whether she is 5 or 50, if you have love in your heart as a man in this country, you will make it your business that your little sisters, your neighbors, your mothers, your sisters are protected from the vultures that are eating up the women in this country alive. Every other week, we wake up to the news that a woman has been raped, abused, or bludgeoned to death. Names like Uyinene Mkhwetyana, Lekita Moore, and Precious Ramabulana continue to be added on the list of innocent women whose lives were brutally taken. Every single day, women like myself go about our lives hoping and praying that we are not next. We don't feel safe at work, the post office, and even in our very own homes. We cannot continue to live in a world where my partner, father, uncle, pastor, or any other man that I encounter daily could suddenly choose to violate my body and bring an end to my life. Babugeli, it cannot be business as usual. Today, we seek to answer the question, how do we end the scourge of gender-based violence in this country? Now, that is why all 6 of our leaders today, regardless of their gender, have come together to help us find a solution. Let us meet them and hear their vision statements. Good evening to you, Leader 1. Your vision statement, please.
Who taught us to look outside ourselves, outside our community, outside our unique values for solutions? For the longest time, Black people and Black women have been taught that they are inherently inferior, that they are without the capacity to meaningfully contribute to discussion. However, I am a staunch believer in and an advocate for the inherent capacity of Black people and women to contribute solutions. I'm an inherent advocate of Black and female intellect. Ngalokho bakithi ngithi, people-inspired solutions to our problems. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Leader 2. Your vision statement, please.
I am an African, taught the French Revolution and not the Battle of Isandlwana. Oh, Bigo, I have lost my identity. General Ani, I have lost my patriotism. However, today I'm reminded, South Africa, that this land was not gifted to me by my forefathers, but it was given unto me by my children, so that one day I may return it to them with a better African identity. South Africa, my people, brothers, sisters, and mothers, join me today in building a nation centered in Afrocentrism. Bonyana nentombi za Afrika, vukani siye phambili.
Thank you very much, Leader 2. Welcome, Leader 3. Your vision statement, please.
Afrika nozala umzuntundu. I am on a mission to establish contact beyond the grave, to assure the heroes of our past that their struggle was not in vain, but most importantly, to remind you and I that our voices did not get drowned by the echoes of our forefathers from the bullet of the colonialists. Africa is not poor. Africa needs a new type of citizen, a catalyst for change, a surgeon for humanity, and an advocate for Africanism. If not you and I, then who? And if not now, then when?
Thank you very much, Leader 3. Good evening to you, Leader 4. Your vision statement, please.
South Africa, I stand before you today not as a contestant behind a podium, but as a young Black woman with a dream. Nginephupho lapho khona ukuba umuntu wesifazane eNingizimu Afrika kungesilithikithi lokubulawa ngesihlungu noma ukudlwengulwa. Nginephupho lokuhamba ngiphephile nokuthi lapho ngizwa izigi zendoda ngingafuni ukubaleka. South Africa, I hope ukuthi nakulokhu zizojika izinto.
Thank you very much, Leader 4. Leader 5, hello. Your vision statement, please.
Korola kwashikwembu kube nangwena. the creation of a peaceful and prosperous society that includes all people of all races, regardless of gender and transcending sexual orientation, is the development of people with a sociological understanding for societies within which they operate, restoring prosperity and promoting the cause of peace for all. South Africa, I am the one you've been waiting for.
Thank you very much, Leader 5 and Leader 6. Good evening. Your vision statement, please.
My voice, my mind, my life. 3 things I will use to fight for those whose suffering is silenced. Youth hindered by a lackluster education system. Women under siege by the patriarchy, from the gender pay gap to gender-based violence. Queer bodies systemically excluded from all sectors of society. The 99% who've been repeatedly failed by the state. And Black Africans who continue to live under the dictatorship that is the legacy of apartheid. South Africa, I give you my voice, my mind, my life.
South Africa, these are the 6 leaders that will be championing #Project South Africa. Now, remember, you at home can be a part of this conversation and hold them accountable on any of our social media pages. We are on Twitter and Instagram at One Day Leader and One Day Leader Season 8 on Facebook. Gugulethu, you had an opportunity to vote for your favorite leader. Let's take a look at who you chose to lead the pack.
This week's viewer vote sees Bal leading with 4,633 votes and Tabani trailing behind with 561 votes. Kushubile. This means that Bal gets 1 point. Congratulations.
Now, joining us tonight as a guest judge is a man who's playing his part in grooming a generation of men who do not perpetuate social ills like gender-based violence. Please help me welcome Mr. Nick Nzama, founder of Boys to Men. Now, Nick, there have been plenty of conversations happening around gender-based violence, and some people, go as far as proposing solutions. But do we really know the root causes of why we're faced with this major problem in our country?
I don't believe that we actually do know, but all we can do is to endeavor to find the solutions and work together, because everybody has to take their responsibility and actually play their part. Everybody in our society needs to play their part, starting with looking at the way we're raising our boy children. Because men are the biggest perpetrators of gender-based violence. So we need to look at the way that we are raising and socializing men from an early age.
All right, thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing a lot of your other insights this evening. Now, joining our guest judge are faces you're all too familiar with. Allow me to introduce you to our resident judges. They are Ndumiso Hadebe, an economist, entrepreneur, a faculty member of a leading SA business school, the recipient of the Gauteng Premier's Excellence in Business Award, and the winner of this very show, Season 2. And of course, Gugulethu Mhlungu. She has over a decade experience in media as a talk radio anchor and writer. Currently, she serves as a deputy editor for leading South African magazine and was the winner of the 2015 Columnist of the Year at the Legends Media Awards. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our judges. Geez, this is a very heavy subject, Mzansi, but here on One Day Leader, we never shy away from very necessary conversations. Masbuye Dolo, we further unpack the crisis around gender-based violence that we're currently facing as a country. Unganyagazi.
My name is Ndumiso Hadebe. I work as an economist and judge on SABC1's One Day Leader. The phenomenon of femicide in South African society places me as a man in a very difficult position. I am ashamed. Allow me to pose a direct challenge to you, man to man. What are you doing about that man who forces himself on your mother, your sister, aunt, or even that next door neighbor? What are you as a man today doing about it? A woman's no means no.
Ngiphinda nginamukele ku-One Day Leader. Tonight we're having a very tough, difficult conversation, but a very necessary one. We're tackling the issue of gender-based violence. Nick, I'd like to bring you in here. I understand that you have a personal story that really propelled you to starting this initiative where you're trying to build a society of better men.
Yes, my son was involved in a relationship with his teacher. The teacher at the time, the relationship started when my son was 14, and eventually, the relationship started when my son was 14, and when he was 19, and the teacher at the time was 67, him and his friends actually murdered the teacher. So when I say a relationship, I mean a sexual relationship. So you can imagine a 14-year-old and a then 63-year-old woman having a relationship. So eventually the boys murdered the lady in question, and he was then sentenced to 25 years in prison.
Nick, thank you very much for sharing that story. Mzansi nizwela ukuthi ingane that was 14 years old was a victim to someone that needed to take care of him and look after them as a pupil. And that child later became a perpetrator of gender-based violence. Now, our leaders were tasked with taking a journey into understanding gender-based violence on a personal level. Let's take a look at how that went.
Today, we are meeting with Usis Ntlanhla, who is an activist. Umuntu ke wahlukumezeka ngendlela eziningi, and uthi naye ke wazithola esimeni la hlukumeza abantu as a way to have an outlet for her outrage.
Welcome to this is my other home, obviously. I spend a lot of time here, hiking, camping, and just reconnecting with truth. I'm not an activist. Literally, I'm just a mother who's raising a son and a woman who has experienced abuse and has been an abuser as well, and has literally done a 360-degree turn and healed and reconciled and found ways of dealing with this situation. So if you guys are open to it, but you need to be very open, because a lot of things I'm gonna say are very unconventional.
I think that's what will make it real.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go.
Haribuaka contributing to stopping gender-based violence. Renahana the seminars, conferences where these speakers get together and speak and all of that. So, nesi tsela it really healing.
I'm just really terrified of falling and getting hurt. And I've got a lot of old injuries, so I just was really scared about falling. But luckily, everyone was very helpful, very supportive. Tobani especially was very patient with me.
What do you think the function of the hike is in relation to gender-based violence?
Journey. So it's been an issue. We've been moving around in circles. We went around this route back and forth, and that's what's been happening in this gender-based violence.
Being in an environment ongayqhelanga and having to familiarize yourself with that environment while also relating it to the task at hand.
So when I was 3 years old, I was sexually violated by a man who lived across the road from my grandmother's house. I never told anyone about it.
Loo nto indenze ndaxhwaleka, ndazibona ndinxunguphele kancinci uba ngumntu onjani ovele ahlukumeza adlwengule umntana oneminyaka emithathu.
When I was around 16, I was violated again sexually. When I was around 18, I was violated again sexually, and this time I was on stage performing, because that's what I always loved to do. I loved performing, I loved poetry, I loved speaking, I was part of the youth parliament, so I was that person. And as he was violating me, he said to me, "That's what you get for exposing yourself." And then I became very angry. That's when I became angry against men. And as fate would have it, when I grew older, I gave birth to a male child. And I wasn't on great terms with his dad. And I wasn't on great terms with men. But I had a boy child. So I was a very angry and an abusive mother towards my son. Because that boy child is going to grow up and take out all the anger that he felt based on the things I did to him on other women.
I think what she was saying really resonated with me because firstly, I think any survivor who's so open and so candid about their experiences is incredibly inspirational and incredibly important to the movement.
A lot of us as mothers don't realize that we are creating monsters.
So njalo masikhuluma ngendaba ye-GBV nanokuthi siyini isixazululo amehlo onke abheka abantu besifazane as if yithina inkinga.
I also realize that in society, in most cases, boys are not given spaces to feel and to express themselves emotionally and to cry and to show pain and to show hurt and so on. Boys are told to man up. Boys are told to suck it up and be a man. All I can ever do is treat my son better, teach him better, show him better, allow him to express himself, allow him to cry and so on. Engage with other mothers who have sons.
Umlayezo yena lo awubeka ngaphandle kwabantu emphakathini asiwona umlayezo osujwayele. Abantu besimame bakhathele, banolaka. The experiences have been tormenting. Ngeke sithi ngevikeli 1 kushone nje abantu abayi-10. That's not normal. And so there's a lot of frustration.
I'm taking responsibility for the wrongs that I have done. And I'm saying, because of the wrong that I did, I need to rectify that. And it starts with my son.
We're teaching sons, we're teaching fathers, we're teaching brothers to build character for the next person, not for themselves.
I have a question for all of you. In what way, individually, are you contributing to the problem?
In which way individually are you contributing to the problem? A question that many of us need to ask ourselves. And I'll come to Gugu for this one. There are many people who perpetuate gender-based violence, and that could be women and men.
What we know is that all violence is connected. So even when we speak about gender-based violence, we can't speak about how violence plays out in other parts of society. So how violence is normative in day-to-day life. In childbearing, often children will experience violence for the first time at home, either through abuse or through someone they know, but also ideas of discipline, right? Where the idea is we socialize children and later we socialize adults into believing that someone who loves you can harm you, right? And there's this idea of trauma bonding where I will harm you and then say I love you and make it better.
Thank you very much, Gugs Babugeli. This is a very complex and multi-textured, multi-layered conversation. Angeke siqede ngosuku olodwa kodwa into ebalekile ukuthi sithole indlela zokuxazulula lento esivelele lana eMzansi. We're going to take a quick break. Think about the conversation that is happening here tonight. Think about the insights you're hearing, and most importantly, think about how you are going to start doing something to bring an end to GBV. Welcome back to One Day Leader Season 8, Konalagwe SABC 1 Igama Ngingo Pearl Shongwe. As women, men, and even children, we're all uncomfortable with having this conversation because, quite frankly, it's one we shouldn't be having if we were in the perfect or ideal society. Kodwa-ke, uma thina singakhulumi ngayo, who will? We're about to debate on this very subject, but before we do, let's take a quick look at the rules of engagement. You have 60 seconds to propose, 90 seconds to debate, and 30 seconds to conclude. Our first debate will be between Leader 5 and Leader 6. We ready? How can we end the scourge of gender-based violence? Your time starts now.
Gender-based violence is a profound and widespread problem in South Africa, anchored by gendered power inequality, rooted in patriarchy, which disproportionately affect women and children. Although it is not exclusive to South Africa, high levels here are a cause for concern. According to the South African Police Service, rape cases grew by 3.9%, the highest in 4 years. An estimated 16% of HIV infections could have been avoided had women not been subjected to gender-based violence. A research paper from the University of the Northwest states that an average 10 lesbians are raped each week to correct their sexual preferences. Therefore, there must be critical conversations geared towards dismantling the outdated and uninformed notions that breed patriarchy by initiating collaborative efforts between the Soul City Institute and the Department of Basic Education, anchored by the African peer review mechanism. We must bring shows like Soul City and Soul Buddies back so that they can conscientize the public about the effects of gender roles and how they breed patriarchy. We must adopt the United Nations framework, he for she, that is championed by the former Deputy President of South Africa, who's now the current Executive Director of Women and Children in the United Nations.
Thank you very much. We need is 10 debate it out.
Okay. The reason why we must utilize an intervention championed by the Department of Basic Education, it is because school is the first avenue of socialization for young boys and girls outside their immediate family. We should utilize the School Buddies Club, which is a school-based project focusing on teaching children about gender-based violence to improve the services provision and community awareness so that when young boys and girls grow up, we don't focus on their gender but interest and ability.
Right. So you briefly mentioned media. I disagree with you in this point. While I think, the use of soul buddies, etc. Right, Soul Buddy, Soul City, etc. Right? I don't think.
Let me tell you why it will be.
Okay, can I finish my interjection firstly? Thank you. Cool. I think on the ground engagement is a lot more valuable. Can you tell me what that looks like under your policy?
Let me tell you. Shows like Soul City in the 1990s, in 2000, HIV was seen as a taboo in South Africa. But shows like Soul City helped to conscientize the public about how it's possible to live with someone who's got HIV and AIDS. How it's possible to even conceive a child with a person who's got HIV and AIDS without you self-conceiving. And that led to a societal will. We need to bring back this show so that we can conscientize the young ones from an early age. I don't understand when she says media is not going to work, because media is very important and children consume it, because we must teach them from an early age. I'm not going to give you time. If you want to jump in, just jump in Nanya Hamba. We must then take the words of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie when she says we must all be feminists so that we can grow.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. You have the remaining 30 seconds, Leader 5.
We must get to a point. Problem with gender, it prescribes how we should be rather than what we should be. It fits into the notion of uninformed and outdated societal norms that patriarchy is normal. Boys and girls, men and women are undeniably born different, but socialization exceeds these differences. We must get to a point where women empowerment and gender equality is seen as an agenda for us all, not for women. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The tables are turned. Leader 6, it's your time.
We live in a world driven by power and which is inherently patriarchal, where women and queer bodies are viewed as subordinate to men. Further, it's important to note that this kind of violence is systemic and it doesn't exist in a vacuum. 3 levels of action in this speech. Firstly, at an individual level, we must ask ourselves how our own behavior makes us complicit and what we can do with limited resources to combat GBV in our immediate spaces. Secondly, at a community level, NGOs and community-based organizations can do work around gender equality, the protection of women and children, and empowerment of women. Specifically with men and boys, they can become engaged in critical reflections about masculinity, educational activities, and community campaigns. Finally, at a state level, there's immense room for improvement. Recognize 5 sub-points here. Legislative reform dealing both directly and indirectly with GBV, the rule of law and ending impunity for GBV, bridging the gap between black letter law and reality, improving access to services as well as the services themselves, for example, healthcare, shelters, counseling, etc., and working with communities on preventative measures. Our fight against GBV will never progress if we remain fractured as a society.
6, you may debate it out.
Do you need clarity on anything, or can I continue?
No, my problem is that when we speak about legislature, I for one believe that when we look at the history of South Africa, we have achieved as changing the status quo through a societal will. Let me take you back.
Sure,
in the
okay,
1980s.
cool. Lucy, this is my time now. Right.
Okay.
I'm going to prove to you how my
It's
method
both
is
your time, leaders, just to remind you.
Okay,
right, so
thank you.
I'm going to prove to you now why this method is so necessary and effective, right? This approach is necessary because men and boys are the target audience for primary prevention, right? They hold social norms and have positionality to influence other men, right? They have to be engaged to prevent GBV. Secondly, it's effective because they can learn from each other and they're not able to best share
How
practices,
is this different
right?
from
So
the seminars that I held each and every week after
under
a
the
woman is
status
killed?
quo, leader,
How is that different?
under the status quo, there are 4 barriers to engagement that men face, and my policy directly tackles those, right? It's things like accountability, awareness, and privilege and silence that men have, right?
Bakayethu, no, there are a number of legislatures. This thing requires societal will. Look at how we champion the internal resistance through societal will. Look
Sure,
at
but
how
Lucy, that's not
ARVs
exclusive to your model.
Look
It
at how
happens on
ARVs
my
got to be
side as
modeled
well.
out to the public.
Speaking, you cannot
after
claim that
societies
is exclusive
mobilized
to
together
your
and challenged the
side.
government to roll out ARVs, there were laws that were aimed at making sure that people get healthcare, but the
that can
government
happen
refused
under my side as
until
well.
people
Lucy,
get to a point where
please
there's
don't speak
societal will.
over me. So what can happen under legislative reasons that laws which enshrine women's basic socioeconomic rights can be strengthened and they can be realized, and then women will actually have the agency
Your
and the
president
ability.
announced the strengthening
You are
of
continuously speaking over me. I actually can't get to
bill
my
on
model.
gender-based violence. How is that different?
You haven't actually given
Time
us
is
anything
up. Thank you very
contentious.
much. Leader 6, you have the remaining 30 seconds.
Panel, my speech is 3 minutes in length, and once Pearl tells me that my time is up, 6 people would have been sexually assaulted. It's important to remember that perpetrators are not a homogenous group. Similarly, we ought to remember that survivors are not all the same. As a result, in our fight against GBV, we have to work with every single person we meet and every single aspect of our society. As much as we are angry, and justifiably so, at the abhorrent rates of violence against women and children, we have to shift the discourse and understand men and boys as not being the problem, but being part of the solution.
Time is up. Thank you
change.
very much, Leader 5 and Leader 6. Ndumiso, let me come to you and get your reflections on that first debate.
Vusi, I think you had demonstrated a lot of insight from a policy perspective. However, I do think Bell addressed it at both an individual, community, and policy level. And for that, I think it was quite practical in addressing it at all of those components. But overall, great contribution.
All right. Thank you very much, Ndumiso. Googs, are you ready for us?
It was very, very close. In fact, on one of our scores, there was a tie. But winning this one for us is Bell.
All right, thank you very much. Congratulations to you, Leader 6, on winning that first debate. Now, for you at home, the voting lines are now officially open and will only be closed on Monday afternoon at 12 midday. Ngakho-ke votela umholi omthanda kakhulu ngoku-SMS igama elithi leader nenamba yabo kwi-SMS line yethu ethi 34708 at a cost of R1.50 an SMS. Nikhumbula ukuthi your votes will be revealed at the top of next week's episode. Must be $8 we get to our next round of debates. One Day Leader, the show that grooms potential leaders to becoming the leaders of tomorrow. Tonight, we're discussing the issue of gender-based violence. Now, it is a conversation that can make people very uncomfortable. At the same time, it's one that we should be having and having one progressively. It is time for us to get into our next round of debates. Leader 1 and Leader 3, it is your turn. You're familiar with the rules of engagement. Leader 1, your time starts now.
Kev, what we need to be conscious of in this debate is who exactly is the actor that is the doer. In this debate, it could be men, it could be mothers, it could be the state. Who I'm going to specifically focus on is the government. My solution is state-mandated corrective education. When the Holocaust happened, after that period, the German government made it mandatory that every child in Germany ought to learn why the Holocaust was wrong, an effort at corrective education. In South Africa, we only see these initiatives that are temporary from corporate, so companies like Absa, like Standard Bank. So why do we need state-sanctioned, state-supported corrective education? Firstly, because corrective education is most likely to happen through the education system. This means that learners constantly engage and are tested on how to apply this knowledge. Therefore, learners have an incentive to actually learn what they're being taught because it has a direct impact on them. For example, it helps them pass that course, it helps them do well in school. The second
Time's up,
reason
Leader
why
1. You have 90 seconds to engage.
The The second reason why this is also good is that we have the capacity to control the syllabus. This can be used strategically. One, we can choose who sets the syllabus. It could be gender equity organizations, feminists themselves, feminist organizations. It means that we can also choose the knowledge that we deploy. We can range from teaching children why gender-based violence is wrong to more theoretical stuff on why, patriarchal norms perpetuate rape culture.
But we already have policies and programs in place. Don't you think the problem
You're not understanding what I'm saying. I told you that these are temporary. These are temporary initiatives. We need a consistent state-sanctioned initiative, an initiative that becomes a part of the education system. Why, again, is this good? One, I just told you that we control things like what the syllabus is, who contributes to how we said it. That's good because it means we use informed
The education system can only do so much because you only spend so many hours in the day. What about the traditional structures?
You're undermining the impact.
I'm not undermining. I'm just
Children
saying
spend most of their day
being done
there.
before. Can I ask you something?
It hasn't been
Can I ask you something? Let's look at young boys in the Eastern Cape who grow up under those traditional structures where they have umkiti. That's a conversation I can't have with someone who's male. How do you address that? Because from my perspective, they're actually encouraging.
Here's why state-sanctioned education is
masculinity.
You can't engage with those men
like that.
Tata. What does state-sanctioned, what's this corrective education do? It standardizes information because we're all taught the same thing. So people we can't be disingenuous to the fact that
time is up. Thank you very much. Leader 1, you have the remaining 30 seconds.
Panel, different communities are taught differently when it comes to the matter that we're discussing. History, for the longest time, when history has been introduced in school and made compulsory, we now have a standard understanding that apartheid was, in fact, a crime against humanity. We have therefore created a standard understanding of our past. We need to apply the same tool when it comes to gender-based violence, to standardize knowledge, because everyone interacts with this matter so broadly that we can never interact with people or try to call them out.
Time is up. Thank you very much, Leader 1. Leader 3, it is now your turn. You have 60 seconds.
Self-mastery is about the persona, and it exists in a place called life. There is significance in defining that place before understanding the behavior of that persona so that it is not misplaced. We have maps called paradigms. Now, these maps give us information about situations, and they are internal images of the outside world. In any given situations, we pull out these maps, and they tell us how to respond to those situations. So if the map is wrong, we make mistakes in that situation. But if the map is right, we're able to act correctly according to the nature of the situation. So essentially, what kind of maps are young boys and men carrying? Now, how we perform is based on our abilities to overcome driving forces and on the strength of our restraining forces, which both exist in our mind as one thing, is self-image. And whatever definition you give that self-image, driving or restraining, it will play out accordingly. We all have mental potential, provided we experience brain damage. Now, our paradigms are based on our perceptions. What we need to address are the psychological and environmental factors that influence the perceptions that young boys have.
Time is up. Thank you very much. Your leaders have 90 seconds to engage.
So what I'm saying is that we need to look at the circumstances men have found themselves in and how they respond. We then need to understand that out of the interaction between the circumstances and the response, the outcome arises. Essentially, we cannot separate gender-based violence from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, poverty, disrupted families, reduced functioning of police and justice systems.
We can't try to understand every single person in South Africa.
What I'm saying is that you need
a standardized approach. That
we need to incorporate men and boys as perpetrators, as victims, as survivors, and agents of change. We must realize and recognize and address their vulnerabilities, or we won't get anywhere. You need to understand the young boy who was raised by a father who went to war. War disables a man to provide for his family, and that victimization will then translate into the man being a perpetrator.
So essentially, what perception does that father have? Stress disorder. Let's normalize things like addressing mental health. We can still deal with that.
We need to address the perceptions that young boys have because their parents are shaped around that, and that determines their performance in society. We cannot leave them out of the conversation.
We're absolutely not going to. My solution doesn't say boy children should go out of the class when everyone is taught. They're also incorporated. But what you're saying is that they suffer from individual issues. We can deal with that. We can normalize things like counseling. We can normalize speaking out about stress.
To work against gender-based violence with women, there is a need to work towards transform norms around gender relations and
time is up. Thank you very much. Leader 3, you can conclude your debate.
If we address the environmental and psychological factors that influence the perceptions of young men's paradigms environments that are shaped around their perceptions and encourage them to build character on the basis of humanity and integrity, not treating the other person properly. We are building a foundation for self-mastery. So South Africa, before we experience a societal revolution, every young man and boy in South Africa needs to experience a personal revolution. For as long as
Thank you very much, Leader 1 and Leader 3. We saw some insights coming out of that debate, varying views. Perhaps I should come to you, Nick. What was your feeling on that debate?
I think the biggest outtake for me was that leader number 3 focused a lot on the role of the boy child, which perhaps makes me a bit of a biased judge on this one, and also at the understanding of the psyche, which is a great takeoff, because if we do not understand the psyche behind why people do these things in the first place, the maps that she spoke about, that I think was a stroke of genius. And then, but also at the same time, leader number 1 spoke about the focus on education, which is fundamental and key, because if the homes are not doing it, because obviously as the family structures, we failed in this aspect. So the focus does need to be on the education system. I give a big heads up for that.
Thank you very much, Nick. And Ndumiso, let me come to you for the verdict. Who took that second debate?
The verdict is Zizi.
Thank you very much, Ndumiso, and congratulations to you, Leader 3, for taking that debate. It's pretty obvious who our final debaters will be, Leader 2 and Leader 4. So, Leader 2, we'll start with you. You have the first 60 seconds.
South Africa, it seems that we have an epidemic that is seemingly scourging the face of our country. And that epidemic has been growing more than 100% rate since 2015 until 2017. Our mothers, our sisters, our children, they are being raped. They are being killed by us men, violent society. So we need all stakeholders in societies to come into interplay so that we can groom a better society where young boys see these women as partakers and not subhuman beings in society. Now, when I say all stakeholders, firstly, we need government to come into interplay. We need patriarchal society, which is the traditional leaders, to come into interplay. We need the religious leaders, because they have a greater influence in our religion and our perceptions, to also come into play. Now, what do I mean when I say that we need to bring about the government onto board? We have Section 37 on our current constitution, which speaks about effecting a state of emergency. State of emergency, you only bring it into effect when you wish to curb a certain killer disease that is threatening the existence
Time's
and
up,
the lives
Leader
of the
2.
people
You have
in the
90
state.
seconds to engage.
Sobani, can I just interject? We need to be very genuine in this debate and appreciate the fact that women are being abused and children are being killed is nothing that started today. So in as much as we want to facilitate these conversations, how do we undo those harmful sentiments that have been carrying on for so many years?
If you had just allowed me to continue with my speech, you would have learned that what you want me to tell you.
Okay,
now this is what I want to tell you.
How do you undo the harmful sentiments that men already have?
Now, this is what happens if you want to bring state into interplay by activating in a state of emergency.
Sobani,
this is what happens.
While the state does that, a man is raping a child. How do you then deal with that conversation and also deal with that man who's raping a child in that moment? Tell me.
Will you allow me to speak?
I am, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, if you're activating state of emergency, now you are forcing government to bring in stringent laws that are going to look to either reverse the unforeseen, the past detriments that had been done in society. And you also are going to inject funds that are going to be able to assist you.
Who were perpetrators of rape are given parole and they go back to the community
now
and
this
rape
is what happens,
on parole.
Ma'am,
How do you deal with that?
Can you please wait and listen?
Okay.
Now, if you're activating state of emergency, you do not act in the same way that you think you're going to be acting, because currently the state is acting in a normal state, but under the state of emergency, people who are perpetrators, they do not become people that are allowed bail, because what happens currently,
Sobani,
if
can
I rape someone, she can go and
Time is
report
up.
to
Thank
the
you very
police.
much, Leader 2. You have the remaining 30 seconds.
Now, this is what happens in our society. I said we need to also bring about traditional leaders. We know that in our societies, men, they listen to what their traditional leaders, some of the cultural norms in society, people still listen to what their traditional leaders have to bring about. Now, if you have traditional leaders who then depacificate how the structure of patriarchy in our societies is, it makes our society to be better, because they will tell us how to appreciate these women. If it was preached in our churches that it's not just only a man that is expected to be a pastor, but
Time's up. Thank you very much, Leader 2. The tables are now turned. Leader 4, you have an opportunity. Your 60 seconds start now.
For as long as we still have men who say, not in my name, or who say, not all men, it means that men are in denial of the fact that they are perpetrators of gender-based violence. It means that the government, which is led by men, will never want to declare a state of emergency just because women are being raped here and there, right? It means that Thobani's solution can never work. Panel, South Africa, I tell you that when I was in grade 1, my mother told me to not accept sweets from a stranger because this person is most likely to rape me. And this conversation escalated to me having to carry pepper spray and defend myself through learning how to throw a mean punch when I was in first year, which means that no difference has happened from when I was in grade 1 until I was in first year at UJ. The conversations have been happening, so city has been playing, but there is no change in behavior. I think that what we need to look at is how our justice system is failing the victims of these crimes, also the families of these victims. You find someone, as I asked Thobani, the man who killed Tasni van Wyk is a guy who was on parole in Cape Town. He was on parole and he went
Time is up. Thank you very much. You have 90 seconds to engage.
It means that we have a justice system which does not threaten.
The fact that under state of emergency, the justice system does not take place.
Who will declare the state of emergency when men are in denial about them being perpetrators of gender-based violence? They will not want to do that. You are failing.
Last week, do you understand that Cyril Ramaphosa declared that in Parliament?
South Africa.
Let's not use gender-based violence as a stigma in society.
President
so it means that they can still also acknowledge the fact that we need state of emergency
South
in our
Africa,
country.
we have a problem of a country where people don't respect prisons. Men will do something
State
and
of
say,
emergency enforces rules and prisons to become citizens.
No, men,
also society. Society, do you understand the fact that her solution solves the current perpetrators? It does not enforce the change in the coming future leaders.
Men do not respect our prisons because the conditions of our prisons.
You need to change the young boys. Young boys need to see models.
Who has this? Let's have this conversation. Who has the conversation with the young boy? Because the parents of this young boy.
If a young boy sees his father doing good in society, he's also going to do good. State of emergency enforces the current males to become people. Traditional leaders, they teach men to become good role models. Churches teach them to become good role models in society.
To say that men who have been raised to believe that women should be subjects of the kitchen are the same men who should teach their girl children.
Traditional leaders acknowledge that. It changes it. Bring them into play.
These are the same traditional leaders who say Ugutwala is okay. You cannot expect the same men
them into
to have
engagement tables.
How do you bring them
because
when
now
they
we're discussing a problem once they sit at
Thank you very much. Time is up. Leader 4. You have the remaining 30 seconds to conclude.
South Africa, we have a problem of men who are not in a position to accept that their cultures and traditions are of detriment to our young girls. As long as a man in the Eastern Cape can say Ugutwala is a culture that is good and needs to be prevented, it means that Thobani's solutions can never work. We need a justice system that makes our prisons a place to fear, not a place where a man can think they can go and come back and be reintegrated into society and repeat the same crimes that they were convicted for. We think that our justice system is failing the victims, and we need to have harsher prison conditions that enable these people to change. The state.
Thank you very much, Leader 4. Your time is up. Your time is up. Let us go to Gugulethu.
There was a missed opportunity to look at this issue of judicial reform. So we know it's not the only thing, but it's quite an important thing. The 1 in 9 campaign was born out of this systemic failure by the judicial system to deal with the issue of sexual violence, but more generally patriarchal violence against women, children, and other men, actually. I think the other textures that had come out in the other debates, society, sociology, socialization, community, preventative measures, those for me didn't come out as strongly in this debate. And the research, I think, was also missing.
Thank you very much. Nick, we'll get the verdict from you. Who took that final debate between our two leaders?
It was Zanele.
Zanele, all right. Congratulations to you, Leader 4. Mzansi, asibonani emva kwekhefu.
My name is Wasim Karam, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National Youth Development Agency. I urge my fellow young South African men to equally stem this tide. It rests with us as husbands, as boyfriends, as fathers, to stop the abuse against young women. I urge young men, fathers, boyfriends, to take a stand against this perverse disease that has crept into our society. Let us accept that no means no.
Mzansi, welcome back to One Day Leader. As Wasim Karim said in that clip that we just saw, it rests with you as men who are husbands, brothers and fathers to stop this abuse. We cannot live in a world where 1 in 3 women will be sexually attacked, 2 in 5 are beaten by their partners, and half will be sexually harassed at work. Before we get into the results of the studio audience vote, I'd like to hear from the 2 men on our judging panel, just to get your final thoughts on the topic and just your message to the broader South African community on how we should be moving forward. Ndumiso?
The urgency of the issue of gender-based violence no longer becomes an issue of leaders of tomorrow and what are we going to do about it tomorrow. Unfortunately or fortunately, tomorrow is now today.
The threat is now. The problem is not a problem for tomorrow. And for many of us, it's been a problem our whole lives, with the very real risk that it will continue until the end of our lives. And that's terrifying. And I'd like to believe as an optimist that that won't be the reality, that in some way or another we stem, to use a cliche, we stem the tide.
All right, thank you very much. Nick, let me come to you. Your final thoughts, please.
My final thought on this is that we as men need to take charge in terms of bringing solutions. We need to take responsibility. Whether I've abused a woman in my life or never have, it doesn't matter. I need to prevent it from happening.
Judges, that was powerful. Thank you very much. Now, before the ad break, our studio audience had an opportunity to vote, and I do have the results with me. The person or the leader who was the audience favorite tonight is... Congratulations, Leader 4. You're the audience's favorite for tonight. We are now going to take a look at this episode scoreboard.
At the end of this episode, Vusi and Bell are tied in the leading position with 6 points each, and Thabani and Gugulethu are still lagging behind with 1 point each.
Now, do remember at home that we'll be showing your voting results at the top of next week's episode. Voting lines do close at on Monday afternoon at 12 o'clock. Ngithanda ukubonga our candidates for tonight and doing a sterling job. Our judges, our studio audience, kanti-ke nanilapha emakhaya for being a part of this conversation, and it is an ongoing one. Next week, we'll be discussing yet another thought-provoking topic. I'd like for us to part ways with the words of Frederick Douglass in mind. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. To you at home, I urge you to help us build a GBV-free South Africa. From myself, Shongwe, my personal message is maphoyisa angenislamlele. Ngeke nginerestraining order ngife. Ngeke ngizofuna usizo kuwena ungibuyisele back to the situation that I'm trying to run away from. And angeke